So, we're going to be reviewing here Lies of P. Recently, we just finished the game. This is all in retrospect, by the way. Just this entire review, but it was quite an interesting experience to have. So we've gotten quite a few of these Soulslike games at this point. I'll be honest, there's a little bit of burnout in the genre. I would argue that a lot of these Soulslike games, something that they've been doing is that they have been overplaying their hand, making bosses more and more unnecessarily difficult. I'm starting to argue that boss design is just becoming unfair in a lot of these games. Rather than making bosses interesting, bringing you new elements and new mechanics to play with, and having an interesting boss fighting pattern, instead we're getting a lot of bosses that are just starting to hit way harder than they should. They're pulling moves that are just ridiculous. They're attacking faster. They're in windows that you can never possibly really attack within. And there's all these kind of cheeses that people are having to come up with a lot of boss designs. So I would say that's adding to some level of burnout when you look at the Souls-like genre. But and quite honestly too, if you look at Dark Souls, FromSoft understands how to make bosses difficult, but right, you have that belief within yourself, I can figure out and defeat the boss, and you can. And it never feels like you're getting taken out by any kind of cheese. So when we're looking at a game like Lies of P, I come in with that kind of gripe about it, because we have a lot of these games now that are doing this, where they're trying to be like FromSoft. Some of them succeed, some of them fail. You know, I've played Code Vein. That game started doing some freaking nonsense, right? There were good things about Code Vein, bad things about Code Vein. One of the biggest issues, though, is what, right? It's the game design. And it's the fact that you're making bosses, instead of making a compelling boss to fight, you're making bosses that are just ridiculous. They're ludicrous with their damage counts and whatnot. And ultimately, you just get, right, you either get one shot or something else ridiculous happens. It's not that there's compelling difficulty, it's just there's arbitrary difficulty. So when we look at a game like Lies of P, you know, first of all, I'm going to say this. The game has really great level design, and I found myself consistently impressed by the level design, the world design. The world looks great. It looks beautiful. The architecture is amazing. If I can remember, the world looks great. The level design, you know, I don't think there were that many secrets as you would kind of find in a FromSoft game, but there's always just interesting directions to run in, and there were paths to take that you wouldn't completely expect. And the levels looked interesting, for one, right? They weren't flat, they weren't boring, they weren't dull in any way. The levels had a lot of interesting lateral complexity, and there was, you know, ground levels, and there's like roofs and ladders. You can, so a lot of the quality that I would argue you find in a lot of FromSoft games with the level design, you find that in Lies of P. Lies of P does a great job with level design, I would argue. Now, I would say, when I was playing the game, I was saying, freaking professional trolls made this game. There are moments, bro, like they definitely like to doing things that you don't see FromSoft doing a whole lot of. And one of those things is floors that you fall through. It's so annoying, man. You're walking around, suddenly the floor just collapses. I mean, it's in completely almost arbitrary areas, but you know, it's kind of silly, it's kind of funny, but there was definitely a point where the game was getting to me in a somewhat comical way, right? And so ultimately, the shortcuts, the level design, just how you can move around through these areas, and like also the story that the world is telling you going through the levels. The game does not start as it ends, and that is a beautiful thing that you ever see in gaming. That's really a mark of something really impressive, something great that a lot of games, a good number of them, do not achieve that, but you have that within Lies of P. Lies of P is able to take you through this journey, this kind of story through the world, and where you start is not where you end, right? You learn more about the world that you're set in. You have everything with the puppets, right, in the city, and then you go to the petrification disease and how the world expands from there. And so I have a lot of interesting thoughts around this game, right? It's like it takes you so many places, and it really does take you for like a conceptual journey. That's roughly what I have to say about the world design. World design is huge for immersing you, and that was done really well. Then you've got, and again, they pull certain things that FromSoft doesn't completely do, so they're trying to be somewhat innovative. So I have to give them props for that. Now, for the story of Lies of P, the characters, we spoke a lot about this, right, when playing the game, but the characters and the overall writing for Lies of P, for one, the writers are aware of their own value, and that is huge, right? They don't think that they're going to just provide you something and then just believe, well, you have to like it. It's like, no, that you have to understand what is valuable to any audience member. It's not that you make something universal. It's that you have to understand what is inherently valuable and then express through that. And a lot of the characters that they express and that they wrote, they understood the value that they were possessing, and they understood how to write with maturity as well. Today, you have a huge issue where we don't understand how to write with any maturity. And so a lot of stories are very juvenile, and a lot of outlooks by characters and the way that they speak and communicate, very juvenile. It's all childish. And in this game, the characters have underlying motives, and you pretty much know that. But the way that they lead you on, in some of the ways that they kind of pull a couple of curveballs on you, that's also pretty interesting. Some of the things that they do, like even if you see some of it coming, you don't see all of it coming. They add a good level of storytelling complexity to Lies of P. And this game does a great job of immersing you in this, what I would argue, right? I forget what this is. I think this is an Italian novel, right, by Piccolo? Frick, I have it in one of my descriptions. But anyways, you know, the author, though, I believe it was an Italian novel. But when I was playing the game, I was like, this is amazing, right? French or some kind of Renaissanceian kind of world's level architectural design, and it was very true to its cultural core. And this is something very big nowadays with the worlds that we're creating, the stories that we're creating, is that they're not authentic and they're not genuine, and many of them are deceitful or downright subversive of their cultural core, right? We always have to race wash everything nowadays, right? Because what is it, right? Pinocchio is based on an Italian novel. It's based upon a white culture, Anglo-Saxon-ish culture, European. And this entire story is very European, right? The design of the characters, the races of the characters, they're all just white people. And this is something you don't get nowadays. We have to make everything diverse. We have to force all these people of different races everywhere. You can't have a cultural core or identity to any stories anymore nowadays. So that's one of the biggest issues now with a lot of storytelling, and something that you really got to give props to the Lies of P developers. Again, I've been in one of the descriptions who the studio is, I'm forgetting at the moment, but they did a wonderful job with this game, and they upheld the cultural identity without waning on it. They did throw in one woke-ish character. They didn't have to do it. They probably did it for ESG or something of the like, but and it was the freaking mechanic, blacksmith-ish character. She was half Asian. No, I think she was full-on. Wait, I think she was Chinese. Anyways, Asian descent of some kind. And then she was totally forced. And she was, by the way, the most annoying character. It's funny that typically the most forced characters end up being the most annoying characters, but she was super annoying. And I didn't like her character at all. She didn't need to be there. And that was like pretty much their one trip up was putting in that one Chinese character. And also this whole trend, bro, of making women mechanics and blacksmiths in gaming. It's like, what are you guys doing? You know, we know in real life that no woman is taking up those jobs. No woman is fit for those jobs. They're not going to take these jobs and run with it for a long time, right? And to some extent, because there's a certain level of endurance with these jobs. Anyways, there's a reason why men dominate these jobs, but in modern gaming, we have to keep pushing these. I mean, dude, the amount of games that are doing this. Lords of the Fallen did this. Devil May Cry 5 did this. Go down a whole list of games. Tons of games just keep on trying to put women into masculine roles. Stop it. But one great thing that they did do is that they were not afraid to make a character like Sophia. She's very effeminate. And for that one reason, I really liked Sophia in general. She was attractive. And then on top of that, she was very feminine. And one of the things too, though, is that they weren't afraid to make the women attractive, specifically Sophia, but even the blacksmith girl, they didn't try to uglify her, you know, she's not exactly super attractive, but you know, whatever. I'm not even gonna get into that. It's just, I guess some guy might, I guess it works for certain people. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, she's not objectively that attractive. Is the whole thing. But they didn't try to make her ugly, and that is really what matters. And then even Lady Antonia, if I'm getting her name right, the old woman, they even didn't make her ugly. She's an older woman. She has the petrification disease, and they didn't even try to uglify her. Like, for an elderly woman, you're like, oh, she's decently attractive. Like, I could see an older guy being attracted to her. You know, it's like people in Lives of P, right? We have this huge issue right now in the West. We have to make everybody ugly. And we have to make everybody look so average, I guess, so that we don't offend the audience, all the ugly people in the audience. Hey, you ugly person, don't worry. We understand how ugly you are. We're just going to make people ugly in our game so that you don't feel so terrible about yourself. That's so pathetic, bro. And this is what gaming used to not be. This is what characters used to not look like. And again, this goes back, okay, and we're not going to try and get into an extensive conversation about this. I already went through that a little bit in the playthrough, but they were not afraid to just make people visually appealing. And this is a part of the whole point. The writers understood the value that they were providing you in making this game and making the characters, right? They didn't go out of their way to make really almost anybody ugly. And so for the large part of all this, by the way, this game is not polluted by much of the modernity that we now see today. And so for that one reason, man, I've got to give so much to this game for that. Like, I felt like I was experiencing a genuine story, a genuine game, right? Made by people trying to create an authentic experience. There's a little bit of wokeness thrown in, though. You know, just, I forget who that chick was, what her name was. She was like a complete throwaway character, really. But they tried to make this one chick, this like female, like really, I think like this expert female warrior type of woman, and like you rescue her and she comes back to you at the I'm forgetting the name now, but wherever you are with Geppetto, you know, home base area. She was, again, this is by the way a retrospect review, so I forget some of the names. Outside of that though, they really don't push a lot of feminism. They don't push a lot of any modernity and wokeness. Again, for the large part, a lot of the women are very effeminate and they are not feminists. They're not griping over and with men. They're not trying to wrestle for power. And it's just really, it's authentic towards what men are and what women are in this game. And so for the story, I was immersed. And you've got to give it to this game. They didn't ruin your immersion. They created a beautiful world, beautiful level design. They did a really great job to the extent of like, wow, they did pretty much as good of a job as like FromSoft does. So you got to really give it up to them. They did not do anything to bastardize this genre. And again, with world and character designs, they kept you immersed, they kept you engaged, and they knew that they were aware of their own value. And the huge part of that is, don't make people ugly, bro. No one's spending money on your game so that they can see ugly people. You know, they want to see good-looking dudes. And not like, that's super important, but just men that don't look like losers, you know? And specifically, they want to see freaking hot chicks. And Sophia is an attractive woman, and the wardrobe designs pretty good, decent in this game. One thing to say though, of course, is Pinocchio. Why can we not tell that Pinocchio looks like a definitive boy? Why does he have to look androgynous? That was a terrible decision. Don't know what they're doing. I don't know if there was this whole point they were trying to make, like, is Pinocchio a boy or a girl, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that's the lie. He's a puppet, doesn't really know how much of a boy he actually is. They didn't expand on that point, so whatever. Let's just drop that, because there's really no excuse for making him look so androgynous. Make him have more definitively masculine features. What are you guys doing? We're not going to hinge all of the value on this game being tethered to these things, right? They matter somewhat. Anyways, let's just move on from that point. When you look at the story of this game though, where everything begins and where it continues and how it ends, the game takes you for a freaking ride, bro. It's a journey that really started to make an impression on me. Like, looking back, there's things I actually remember about this game. There's certain things that are said with this game. Oh yeah, and by the way, the character Arlecchino, annoying-ish. Definitely, I played recently Batman Arkham Asylum, and I've realized, oh, they were literally inspired by Riddler from Arkham Asylum, the Batman Arkham games, and they just threw the Riddler, maybe it's the same voice actor, maybe, but they just basically threw the Riddler into this game. He even makes a riddle that the Riddler uses in the Batman Arkham game, so it's a direct Easter egg there, and And when I was playing, I was like, is this guy the Riddler? So he sounded a lot like the Riddler. He makes an exact riddle like the Riddler that makes more by the way, it made no sense in this game. The riddle in Batman Arkham makes sense. So whatever. Just from all that though, Arlecchino, kind of annoying, but he was fine. And ultimately, all these characters are very different from each other. You know, there's a lot of personality diversity in this game. So the characters aren't flat. The characters aren't revolved around one ego or one identity. They're all different people. And they're true to who they are as the individuals as they are. And again, none of it's woke bullcrap. So the characterization was actually very compelling as well. As you're playing through, and another thing I'm going to say, bro, content in this game. I thought this was actually going to be a much shorter game when I started playing it. And I was very surprised to see this game, it goes for a lot longer than you really expect. And they layer it with so much more content. Part of me was thinking as I was playing Lies of P that they probably had because I was thinking about the story, and there's a certain part that I think when you meet with Simon Manus, it was very clear, I think in their design or when they were in development with the game, they definitely probably extended the content because there's a certain gap of the story, mostly where they're fleshing out the petrification disease, and you fight a couple of the same bosses from previously in the game, but this time they have the petrification disease. I'm pretty certain that they extended content in this game, added a little bit more fluff, let's be honest, because I could just see a whole section being cut out that doesn't need to be there with the story. But you know, all the layers though that they create with the petrification disease, the puppets, the brotherhood, the Black Brotherhood or whatever the heck it was called, the Rabbit Brotherhood, I forget. The Brotherhood, that was interesting. That what they did with the legendary blacksmith guy that was basically killed and a guy took over his identity, that was interesting. All the layers of complexity that they add to these different characters, their backstories, the world, they create this whole web and they piece it all together. Now, when we were playing, right, I noted and spotted quite a few plot holes, and there were certain parts of the game, certain core lines of the game that I spotted that didn't really make any sense. It's like, right, at one point, there's this whole point made about your character, Pinocchio, being a hypocrite. They never go into depth about that. It doesn't make any sense. There's no premise, no basis. And that's just one example. It happens many times where there's just no premise or basis for what people think or say or like the positions that they hold. And I had to do a lot of the thinking for the developers, for the writers of the game. It's like, that didn't make any sense. I guess if you think about it like this, makes sense in these different ways, but I had to start rationalizing their positions for them. And that's a bad way to do writing, right? It's like you can lead someone with breadcrumbs, that's fine. But when you're trying to make a point, you have no premise to the rhetoric of your point, and then you're trying to sell someone to digest that point made without the depth or the complexity of proving that point. Oh, look at this. Yeah, hypocrite, as you can see on the screen. There's just, you're not delivering your ideas, though, convincingly. So they did fall into that kind of modern pitfall. I would argue it's a modern pitfall. I don't know, though. Maybe I mean, heck, whatever, man. I don't know if I would have to study that a little bit more, but a lot of past storytelling would typically really build on the rhetoric of what is spoken and said and what positions are held, right, by characters and stories. But for the most part, it really is a modernist issue where a lot of modern writers, they don't really build sufficient rhetoric for the things spoken and said by characters or positions held. And that's an issue I've been seeing with a couple of other recent games lately. But story of this game, though, right? It really takes you for a journey. Things don't begin or continue as they end. And for a long time throughout the game, I was thinking this game is over, right? This is the end of the game, and it just keeps going. You got to give it to these developers. Although, depending on who you are, what your goals are with this game, maybe you'll get burnt out by just how long the game is. Although I would say that's not really an issue, right? This game gives you a lot of content, much more than I was expecting. And that's another thing you got to give to this game. It throws you for this kind of existential philosophical journey, and throughout the entire story, I mean, just all the characters they introduce, all the kind of thoughts and ideas that they probe into your mind, it really takes you for a journey, a deep existential philosophical journey. I do have this one criticism though, and that is the fact that we have so many stories and games nowadays, bro, that are so painfully nihilistic. It's insane. And this game really does commit the crime of nihilism that we're just seeing. It's littered in everything. I mean, it's in Lords of the Fallen. It's in, geez, I'm gonna forget the list on the spot here, right? But I guess you could say Stranger of Paradise had a little bit of nihilism in it. Oh gosh, dude, I'm trying to think. There's tons of games recently, but it's like, okay, right, my mind is in way too many places for this review, so we'll just drop it. But it's like, if I could maybe make a separate whole video about that. Bro, almost every single story that we're seeing nowadays, nihilism. It's everywhere. So, and there's an exhaustive list that we're just starting to see collect recently. So this game definitely falls under the nihilistic category. Now, one of the things that's good about this game is that it does get you thinking, and it is trying to stoke the mind with thoughts, and it's trying to get you to contemplate. And so that's better than what a lot of games I've seen lately is. A lot of games don't get you to contemplate. They're possessed by nihilism. And to be quite honest, I am so sick and tired of nihilism. And I used to never hold this position, but this never even used to be a problem to me. But it's just in the modern age, as we're killing characters like Batman, Superman, you could say Captain America, you think about all these perseverant, aspirational male characters that personified, it's not hope. There's a whole issue with the word hope, but you just don't see a lot of stories though anymore that I'm going to put air quotes, right? Hopeful character. It's not that. Again, it's perseverance, aspiration. Those are big elements of masculinity and striving to overcome despite your suffrage or your struggle, right? And these are stories that are sorely lacking nowadays, and it's just becoming more and more increasingly intolerable when we look at modern storytelling. So this game does fall into the nihilistic category, the whole story. Oh shoot, wait, by the way, there was a recent game where literally it ends and everything didn't matter. Like, you go through the whole story, all the things that you did, none of it mattered. It's complete, again, I'm doing a freaking review video, so I'm going to completely forget. It was literally very recent though, whatever game that was. It was so unbelievable, bro. Like, the amount of nihilism that we just keep placing into everything where nothing matters. And anyways, that's a whole separate video topic that we could probably do. But when we come back to this game, the point's being made here. The story has a lot of complexity. There's a lot of things that you discover along the way with the story, the world. Some of the songs are just, I don't know how much music or how many tracks there are in this game, but the songs are, dude, they're freaking good too. Like, it's really hard to just nail good music in gaming, especially, but just in general. And the music was really well cued and casted for the environment of this game and the overall atmosphere of this game. And it really captures this kind of, I guess, Italian, I call this Renaissance. I don't know what you could, Victorian, I guess is another word that you can use, but the age that the time that they were trying, the time period that they were attempting to possess through this game's character, they absolutely nailed it. And so the world in Liza P, oh yeah, this is Hotel Krat. I just remembered what it was called. But anyways, yeah, and that's the feminist character right there, Bella. But anyways, or Belle, whatever her name is. The characters are so interesting though. And they have complexity to themselves, maturity to themselves, something that we're sorely lacking nowadays. And with that, I have to give it up to these developers. They made a very competent story, a story that did leave an impression on me. I don't know how much of an impression, right? I would have to think more about that. But it wasn't just this game that you play and then you forget, right? Or it's absolute dog water, horse crap. It's not this woke BS. They made a relevant story. And with that, I just have to give it to these developers. They did a terrific job on the story. And in the ending, dude, of the game, Geppetto, how he sacrifices himself, depending on the ending that you get, how he sacrifices himself for Pinocchio, kind of. Let's just put it like this. The ending is very interesting with what, again, very mature storytelling and what they're trying to say about the characters. Geppetto and your character being Pinocchio is there's a lot of layers to it, to like Geppetto, his mindset, who he is as a man, and how he views you, Pinocchio. And actually, it's something for you to actually think about, because it's not just flat. It's not just some one-liner surface level kind of occurrence. There's more to Geppetto's psychology than he directly speaks for. So there's something to contemplate there. And then you look at what and there's some other elements too to analyze. But then the ending ending of the game, one of the best things a lot of great stories do is that they link the beginning of a story to its end. And it was really like after, I'll just say this right now, right? You go on a freaking philosophical existential journey to some extent with this game. When you end the game, they link the beginning of the game, where it starts, all of your kind of intrigue, your questions, your curiosity of the world that you're just kind of thrown into randomly. It beautifully connects the entire purpose of the story, right? It connects the ending of the story to the beginning of the story, the purpose of the story, which has to do with, by the way, Sophia, the state of the world. And Sophia is trying to awaken you to ultimately go through the game's entire story, all of its events, to reconcile the world, to put it as vague as possible. And the way that they connect all of that, like the entire premise of the story, why the story is like jump started in the first place, there's an entire rationale behind why the story exists. And that is something sorely lacking in today's storytelling, game design, world design. They connected the ending of the game with the beginning, and that was something great. Very impressive that they did that. And it's something that we don't see anymore. And so with that, I have a lot to give to this game on that note alone. It is an ending, and overall this whole entire story is a story that it really captures you by just its delivery and the world that it creates, the world that it immerses you into, that it gets you to invest with. And at a certain point, man, like this game was roughly, or low key, it was getting to me. Especially, there's certain beats in the game that are pretty freaking sad. And like you actually mourn certain elements of the story's arcs or the story's occurrences. And so like, dude, you don't get games like this much, especially anymore these days. This game, and so with all that being said, I have to arguably say that it's just because like when I finished the game, I was like, am I gassing up this game a little bit too much? Because I always try to catch myself if I ever really do that. It's just, like thinking back on it all, man, this game legitimately and genuinely provided a value that we don't get anymore these days. And it is definitely probably a hidden gem. When we look at the entirety of the modern gaming industry, the amount of value that they're offering to you here, the amount of content that they placed into this game. One last thing actually to mention is the weapons and the fighting design in this game with your character, the moveset. I would argue that, right, I like Dark Souls 3 and the overall Dark Souls series, Elden Ring as well. I like those movesets quite a decent bit. They always find a way to make the weapons interesting. With this game, at first, it was kind of boring with the weapons. I will say that. Some of it felt a little bit, right, a little bit reused. Some of the weapons, right, some of them just had the same move sets, or they didn't really provide much that was different enough to impress you as an alternative weapon option. And some of the combat abilities, some of them are reused as well. And so during the earlier portions of the game, not too interesting. I would say like the weapons were kind of a letdown for a good portion of the game. I wasn't the biggest fan of any weapons I was using, but later on in the game they start to add a couple more weapons for you to use, and it gets a little bit more interesting. So although even now I don't exactly know what I exactly think or feel about the weapon design in this game, as well as the options that they provide you, I don't exactly know what to exactly think about it. But I start off not too impressed. It got better as you go, and the options got more interesting, and there was more gameplay diversity with these different weapons. And the weapons themselves started to have some more and more interesting mechanics behind themselves of how you use them, what they're used for. So when talking about the weapons in Lies of P, I would say that it's kind of meh. It's average. If we're going to say average for anything, I would say that the weapons were decently average, but they redeemed themselves for the large part later into this game. So yeah, man, with all that being said, Lies of P is a very interesting game that I would definitely argue this is a freaking hidden gem of today's landscape of gaming. This offers you so many layers of value that we just don't see anymore. And with that, this game, when I finished this game, I almost, by the way, didn't finish the game. The freaking nameless puppet was freaking difficult. But when I finished this game, and again, there were plot holes alongst the way and certain plot points that weren't really well fleshed out. I couldn't really tell like why it mattered. But the overall execution of this game was terrific. And this is something that you just don't get anymore with the modern state of gaming. Although I don't really know like what kind of rating to give this game. I would probably say though, like this game is above average at the very least. And arguably maybe it's in the ballpark of like an 8 out of 10, right? Couple of things that it's not perfect on, but there's so many things that they do well though here. And the Unreal Engine 5, by the way, looks beautiful. It looks great. The world, the level designs. I mean, every game that's coming out now with the Unreal Engine 5, they just look terrific. You know, like graphics in gaming has really gone up because of the Unreal Engine 5, and this game looks great because of it. But you know, outside of that, the story, dude, the story was well executed. The maturity of the writers displayed through the storytelling, great. You don't get a lot of that nowadays. They didn't feel like woke writers. They didn't feel like soy boys with their lattes out, sipping as they write and then spilling the latte all over their freaking script and then just saying, run with it, bro. You know, we got a pretty decent story. We got a pretty compelling world, immersive world. And ultimately, I think that Lies of P really does justice to the overall Souls-like genre, as well as just everything that they contribute to the genre as well. They really upheld the quality of Dark Souls. And so I think with that pretty much concludes my thought. This was a really interesting game to play. It left a definitive impression on me just through its world, its story, the journey it takes you on. It gets you thinking about things. It provides you a value that we don't see much anymore these days. And that's a whole other conversation to be had, right? All the freaking horse crap that we get today. But man, it really was well done. And, you know, I'm hoping I didn't forget any core points. It would kind of suck if I did. But anyways, I enjoyed this game, and I would recommend this game. Definitely pick this up, especially if you're looking for a Souls-like game. Pick it up. It's worth playing. It provides a very high quality experience. Storytelling, unlike what we get nowadays. I mean, they did a lot to honor the author. You can just tell, like, this game was definitively made with love. You are immersed in the world. They had a world that they wanted to immerse you in, and they had a story to tell. And overall, everything that this game offers you is something that we just don't see anymore. Games are no longer made with love, no longer made with artistic vision like this game. And again, I have to make this clear. The writers for this game, right? It's not like they're freaking masterpiece types of writers, but they are definitely above average. They know how to make a quality story, and they know how to stick to a quality storyline. I'm not going to give them like masterpiece approval or anything. It's not like they wrote an unforgettable story, but there were some really good elements that they put into here. This game, you know, it took me by surprise. Anyways, I thank you for joining me on this video. And again, give this game a shot. If you're looking for just a decent story, if you're looking for, most importantly and most predominantly, you're looking for a good Souls-like experience, outside of a FromSoft game, then this is definitely a worthwhile experience to get into. Alright guys, so we're going to add this at the end of this video, this review. Now, I was actually looking back, and I had only experienced, I believe it was the neutral ending, or whichever ending it is, that Geppetto calls you just some stupid puppet. Well, I actually went back and I actually saw the "if you lie" ending of the game. And he says, "I'm sorry, son," to you as Pinocchio. Pinocchio is actually tearing up when he sees Geppetto dying before him. And I just have to say it right there, dude, that freaking hits. And I was like, I mean, the ending I got, that hit. I actually felt something there. I was like, oh my gosh. He sacrificed himself for his, you know, fake puppet son, but he still calls you a stupid puppet. Like, okay, that means there's something going on there. That means a lot. That really compelled me. But then I looked at the lying playthrough scene, end of the game, and seeing Geppetto sit there and say, "I'm sorry, son," and Pinocchio, basically, he lies enough throughout the game to become a real boy. Holy crap. That landed. So there's another scene. I think it's either the neutral or it's the good scene, whatever. So I'll probably check it out, but I will just say that those two scenes really landed with me. And also the ending, I believe, also has to do with you allow Sophia to live, right? She has the petrification disease. She's in perpetual torment. That's why she awoke you, is to basically save her from being chained up and having her life force sucked from her, right? I think the ergo, right? And that was also really great seeing how Pinocchio basically gives, I believe, his life essence to her, bringing her back to life. She's a puppet. Half of her, I believe, is a puppet, right? Because the petrification disease just destroyed her body. But he gives her his essence so that she can live, right? That's the end of the, maybe that's the neutral ending, whatever it is. It's still sad, but it landed with me. I liked it. And it has a different range of emotions when you end the game. Because my ending, right, I have my own thoughts about the story because of my ending in the game. And it was a very tragic ending of the game. But I like this other ending I saw because it also delivers really well. So you got to give it up to the developers. And I am, by the way, in the next couple of seconds here, I'm also going to share my thoughts about the other ending. Okay, now I've just seen the other ending. So the other ending is, I guess, more of like a freakish, horror-ish kind of ending where I guess Pinocchio gives away his clock heart to Geppetto, and I think it allows a new puppet that is supposed to, a little bit confusing, I'm going to be honest, but I'm guessing the new puppet is supposed to kind of be a reincarnation of Pinocchio, I guess, brings back Pinocchio, or it's the fact that he created a synthetic child who is now going to exist as the reincarnation of his son, and you as Pinocchio are his fake surrogate son, I guess, right? Synthetic son, and the other one's like a more, to Geppetto, a realistic son. So kind of a weird ending. I don't really even know what to think about it, but yeah, the endings are very interesting. Gets you thinking about the whole story at large, gets you thinking about a lot of things. Each ending has a lot of thought that went into it, and you really got to give it to the writers. They understood. They actually had multiple endings to give. That's for one. Most times when developers, writers do this, they'll throw in other endings to the story, but they don't really have a good idea of what the ending to the story should be, right? It's just for fake or irrelevant player choice, and just make a story and just make it complete. It doesn't matter about whether or not a player can choose their ending, but here it looks like to me that the writers they wrote a story and they had multiple ideas of how they wanted to end the story. So they just gave you a choice, like see one of 3 endings. And I liked pretty much the most tragic ones. They meant the most to me. The other one was a little bit more confusing. Maybe if I understood more about it, it would mean more to me. But from what I saw, it's like, I don't really get it. So anyway, those are my thoughts about the endings. I will be tacking them on to the end of this video so that you can see what I'm talking about. So anyways, definitely pick up this game. I think this is a worthwhile Souls-like experience. I originally didn't think I was going to add this part of the video in, but then just after seeing that, I thought I would share my other thoughts. So yeah, check it out. And here are the endings.
I knew you could do it. We have all the ingredients we need. I dreamed of this day for so long. The moment you'd come back to life. You can be human again by using that vast supply of ergo in the arm of God. I just need the final ingredient. The one that holds your memories and your lifespan. Your heart. If you give me your heart, all these trials and tribulations will be over. You have been a brilliant and a good boy. As your reward, I shall turn you into a real boy. Give me your heart, son. Give me your heart, son. Give good boy till the very end. I believe in you. You are the greatest puppet I ever made. We can be happy now, thanks to you. Thank you. You are such a good boy. This finally feels like family. Thank you for returning, Carlo.
Is this truly the future you wanted?
Just need the final ingredient. The one that holds your memories and your lifespan. If you give me your heart, all these... You have been a brilliant and a good boy. Give me your heart, son. Give me your heart. I believed you were a good boy. Well, I suppose Carlo was mischievous. It seems you inherited his personality instead of his memory. But a father always looks after his children. In my own way, I grew to love you. After all, I'm disappointed in you. I didn't mean for this to happen. I believed you were a good boy. If you refuse, then I'll have to retrieve it myself. My son. Were you going to destroy Carlo's heart? No. You're just a useless puppet. Were you going to destroy Carlo's heart? Sorry.
It's so good to see you.
Alright guys, so I'm actually going to fill in on a little bit of what was that first ending about. So I looked up a little bit about what happened, and it's the darkest ending in a sense that you could get, and it's very interesting, I guess. Really weird what Geppetto's character is in this game, and I guess it gets you thinking in a lot of weird ways about what it's all about. You can think about it for yourself. This is very strange though. So what the first ending, where Pinocchio gives away his heart, and then there's this evil, I guess, Carlo, that is reincarnated in the briefcase of Geppetto. What it is that at the end, when the camera's panning out, the new Pinocchio kills everybody in Hotel Krat. And all of them, by the way, when the game is finished, so by the way, there's a much darker element of that now. When you see Geppetto smiling at Pinocchio and Pinocchio smiling at Geppetto. Interesting. But everyone that's killed ends up being replaced by a puppet variation of themselves. So I did not realize that. That is freaking insane. That's the kind of ending you get, though. Everyone gets replaced as puppets and you kill their human selves. And then the other element, too, is at the end there, Geppetto will leave a letter talking about how the petrification disease isn't really a big deal, or he'll talk like it's not a big deal. And he actually leaves Hotel Krat. He leaves the city to go off elsewhere. And some people say that basically he might have actually, in some sense, turned Pinocchio kind of like into a slave to work at Hotel Krat, in a sense, or to keep that city safe as a sort of sense of slave, or whatever you want to word it as. So that's kind of interesting. That's a much darker ending in a weird way. I didn't really expect it to be that kind of ending. It was very confusing to me, but yeah, apparently that's what the first ending is all about. Turns out Geppetto is an absentee father in that first ending that we saw. And before I forget, also, Carlo apparently, when he was an actual boy, and we saw one of his memories beforehand in the story, he actually hated Geppetto. He hated his father before he died. So it's kind of interesting when you look at it. There's a couple things to think about this, but it's interesting. So I guess Geppetto basically reincarnated his son who hated him and redeveloped his son, right? To be in service of what he wanted his son to be. So again, very interesting ending. There's more to say about it, more to think about it. But overall, I did not expect that ending to be that grim.